Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the second in the 5-part IMRP's Lunch and Learn series. Today, we'll be discussing the Children of Incarcerated Parents Initiative here at UConn Hartford with Aileen Pease, who directs the Children of Incarcerated Parents Initiative. So introductions, because we're a small room, it will make sense, a small audience, it will make sense to go around, say something about ourselves or name, department, and what brings us here. Please say something new or interesting about yourself outside of just your work. I'll begin. My name is Irvine Pexagaya, and I help coordinate the Children of Incarcerated Parents Initiative at IMRP with Aileen. And something interesting about me, I have a Staffordshire Terrier who is an amazing dog and is super friendly. So that's something I can think about. So if you can go around, and for the people in the chat, feel free, joining us virtually, feel free to either unmute yourself or introduce yourself in the chat.
So I'm Aileen Pease, and I do direct the Children of Incarcerated Parents Initiative at IMRP. I've been years. Something interesting about me threw me off, even though you told me earlier we do that. The only thing I can think of, I'm a single mom of a 5-year-old, and I graduated from UConn back in the year 2000.
Hi everyone, my name is Sokuni. I am faculty at the School of Social Work, and my area of work is systems change through intersectionality of focused frameworks within the juvenile legal system. Fun fact about me is that Ken Barone is my neighbor and his dog pees in my yard. A couple of times a week, and Ken only does that when I'm sleeping.
No, I only pee in your yard when you're sleeping.
Where did that tree live? So
My name is Ken Barone. I'm the Associate Director at the IMRP, and I manage Connecticut's Racial Profiling Project. I'm not a very fun person, so I don't have fun facts. I did recently watch a TikTok video about people having to give fun facts during corporate meetings, and they were basically just everyone going around talking about their Patagonia vests. So that's sort of, I don't have anything to add other than I'm the guy who makes fun of the people who have fun facts.
So happy you're here. In person first, maybe, and then do online.
Anyone online would like to unmute and introduce themselves, please?
Claudia, if you want to.
Hello. Yes, my name is Claudia Bouchard. I'm a multilingual science
We
teacher.
can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Is it volume in there? It should be on that.
Are we good?
You turn it up.
So I'm a science teacher for the newcomers at Norwich Free Academy. So I have multi-level, multi-grade, multilingual students from all over the different countries.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. And Brandon, do you want to introduce yourself? Yamila, do you want to introduce yourself? This is a test to see who's got the Coralie, sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong.
Hi, Coralie Santana. I'm a MPA student, policy and program associate with the Connecticut Project. And one fun fact about me is that I like to wait till everybody goes first. Goes out.
Thank you, sorry. Mary Addie? Laura, yeah, I need Easter, so I can't figure it out. And then Kim Caviello was next, but I think, did she say she can't? Oh, yeah, Yamila's introduce yourself in the chat.
Yes.
Allied Health student at UConn.
Oh, Brandon, my
Oh.
hands are working.
Oh, thanks, Ben. Go hockey. Oh,
And Kim and yes.
I was at the game when the Red Wings won the Stanley Cup. All right. Let's see. All right, can you, what else? Yeah, Haley Campbell. Yes. Haley. Oh,
No,
okay. Oh, not there, okay.
then we can finish in the room.
I'm Mary Solkisi from the chemistry department. My part is, I am organizing, not organizing, I've been doing the international potluck for the faculty and staff here, and we are invited on Monday. You can be, lots of food, you can be in
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
the fourth row, by the way. Thank you.
What time?
That will be from 12 to 2, and you can go beyond, maybe until 2:30, still there, because we're gonna be eating the leftovers.
Thank you, everyone, for
Pardon me.
Art student.
It's only faculty, but
That, over the game.
yes. Just next. But if you
Okay.
can, that's.
Hi, Andrew Clark. I direct the Institute for Municipal and Regional Policy here at Central. I've been with the Institute since we were at Central Connecticut State University in 2005. And we moved here to UConn in October of 2021. Suppose it's a fun fact, as a parent, I'd have to mention it. My kids are turning 13 and 15 this week, so I'm excited about it.
Oh, it's me. I'm Kamraj. I'm a MBA student, but I'm also a research assistant with the AMRP. Funny fact about me is I'm still figuring stuff out. I love traveling, but I think I'm still getting to know myself. So there's that. I'm a foodie and I love traveling.
Thank you, everyone. I'm going to go fairly quickly so we can get to just talking more about the impact of incarceration on children and family and the work of the initiative. A brief overview on IMRP. IMRP is a nonpartisan university-based organization. We're dedicated to enriching the quality of local, state, and national public policy. We pride ourselves in being able to bridge the divide between academia, policymakers, practitioners, and the community. We have a variety of projects. Some of our current projects include, but are not limited to, the Children of Incarcerated Parents Initiative, the Connecticut Sentencing Commission, racial profiling, as well as the Commission on Racial and Ethnic Disparity in the criminal justice system. Without further ado, Aileen is going to give us an overview on the Children of Incarcerated Parents Initiative, as well as some research and data regarding some of the collateral consequences of parental incarceration in the US.
Thanks, Amy. So I thought I would primarily focus on our initiative, just to introduce the work that we do since we're new to UConn, and I'm so excited to make connections at the university. I do give a little bit of a background on children of incarcerated parents specifically, but I'm trying to focus a little bit on our initiative more so as a way of introduction. To give us a brief history, I know the initial Lunch and Learn was focusing on justice reinvestment, so I thought I would tie in the connection with our initiative. Justice reinvestment started during an analysis of our exponential rise in the prison population and of course the cost of that, and then the state's budget deficit. So the state began to research and work with other experts, including the Council of State Governments, to look at what the state could do And a series of policy initiatives were passed, which were titled Justice Reinvestment. And the goal is to realize cost savings by making a more efficient yet still effective criminal justice system, while maintaining public safety and then investing some of those.
From one of the lunch seminars.
Yes.
There's a there, a water there.
And then reinvesting some of those savings into the communities that tend to feed our criminal justice system. In doing that review, they began to look at the juvenile population, recognizing that they could invest in those youth that maybe that will realize some long-term cost savings and of course benefit the state in a myriad of other ways. And when the state recognized children and incarcerated parents as a population that faces a series of unique challenges, state began to invest in that population through us in fiscal year 2008. And then it's for a quick overview as to what the state may have been looking at, although a lot of this data came out after that initial investment. I'm going to start with just some basic numbers. To get at the prevalence of children with incarcerated parents, this is probably the first time a lot of us have even considered that group of youth. Nationwide, it's estimated, rough estimate, that more than 5 million children have experienced the incarceration of a parent who they have lived with at some point in their life. That it turns out to be 1 in 14 kids who have a parent that they have lived with and have been in prison. This expands more broadly to more than 10 million children who experience the incarceration of a parent at some point in their lives, and that those parents have not lived with. It's estimated, we estimated actually years ago in one of our studies, that a child in Connecticut experiences the arrest of a parent more than 62,000 times a year. I think it's probably many. Real quick, and then I'm going to get into some of the impacts that some research has shown on children and families, but I do want to briefly recognize that children with incarcerated parents, like all humans, have things in common, but also have things that are very unique to them, as an individual. So now that I'm going to generalize some outcomes, some potential outcomes. Briefly, studies on children with incarcerated parents in the last, I'd say, decade have started to identify the trauma, stress, and disrupted attachment that children face, and then the longer term impacts of that on their brain development, their health and behavior. Stigma, certainly, other potential negative effects on children's well-being, financial challenges that the family encounters, and legal challenges to parental rights. Having a parent incarcerated has been identified as a public health issue. The CDC has recognized having a family member incarcerated as an adverse childhood experience. However, it has also been recognized as unique due to its combination of trauma, stigma, and shame. And for those who are aware, the adverse childhood experiences have been identified as a series of obviously experiences children may encounter, including having a parent that is struggling with mental health issues, substance abuse, a youth experiencing sexual abuse, witnessing your mother be violently treated. It's a series of, again, childhood experiences, and then having a family member has been identified as incarcerated, has been identified as one of those. And the ACEs have been tracked to realize long-term health outcomes, including even things as diabetes, asthma, a series of other health consequences that ultimately can result in early death. Parental incarceration in another study has been identified as being independently associated with learning disabilities, ADD or ADHD, behavioral problems, developmental delays, speech and language problems. In addition to some of the, and again, I have many more slides, but I was doing real training, but I want to just kind of give a brief summary of some of the key points to hone in on the prevalence and the severity may have in children. The financial impact, many caregivers report that when the other parent is incarcerated, they struggle to meet basic household needs, including food, housing, utilities, transportation. Caregivers also report not being able to accept a job because of the requirements of being a single parent in a household that has a co-parent who's incarcerated. And to another survey in 2015 had 2 and 3 families reporting difficulty meeting basic needs. Looking at the potential legal impact of having a parent incarcerated on legal rights. A nationwide study done years ago by the Marshall Project analyzed 3 million child welfare cases from 2006 to 2016, so over a 10-year period, to identify the ramifications of ASFA. So real quick, in 1997, ASFA was passed nationwide as the Adoption and Safe Families Act. It created a timeline. So if a child ends up in the foster care system, it imposes a timeline to help the child reach permanency. So we don't have children languishing in the foster care system for a decade or, close to a decade. So it says if a child is within the foster care system for 22 months, then the state should or must file to terminate the parent's rights. So it imposes this timeline. An unintended consequence is when a child is in foster care because a parent is incarcerated. Parents' incarceration or state incarceration, the average length is longer than the timeline imposed by ASFA. And so there are children who are having their parents' rights permanently terminated when the parent will be coming home and there was never even an allegation of mistreatment as a parent. And once your parents' rights are terminated, you're forbidden from having contact with each other. So even if that parent is then released 6 months later, a year later, you want to connect with each other, it's forbidden. So, and so this can obviously have, and then that does not mean to say that the children are then adopted into wonderful loving families either. The children could be languishing in the foster care system, waiting for adoption and the safe loving family to come along that doesn't come along. So just that's the background on ASFA. So what their study, the Marshall Project study, showed was that tens of thousands of children were placed in foster care solely because the parent was incarcerated. For about 5,000 of those, or 1 in 8, their parents' rights were permanently terminated. They also found that mothers and fathers who have had a child placed in foster care because of their incarceration and have not been accused of child abuse, neglect, endangerment, or even drug or alcohol use were more likely to have their rights permanently terminated than a parent who was found to have physically or sexually abused their children.
Don't you think parents who physically or sexually abuse their children should have kids removed from custody?
So what was the question?
Shouldn't the parents who physically or sexually abuse their kids have their kids removed out of their custody?
I would think so. This study was showing that parents who had physically or sexually abused their kids were actually losing their parental rights less often than parents who were incarcerated but had never been accused of any sort of abuse or child maltreatment. That's kind of showing a stark difference that I think we would agree that there'd be maybe greater concern for kids whose parents had physically and sexually abused them than for kids whose parents separated from them temporarily just because of imprisonment and they may come home.
I'm not very good with this, that's why I'm here. If you're permanently terminated, can they revoke it?
A parent can file to appeal the decision, but it's unlikely to have it successful. Yeah, there have been a few appeals across the country where, and it's usually been based on if the incarcerated parent was never notified, sometimes communication is difficult. And so there are parents who say, I never was given a letter that said this case was going on, or they were filing to terminate my rights, or I wasn't given the chance to go to court that day. I would have gone to court to say, I'm going to be home, I love my child, I intend on coming back to my child. But the state never brought me to court to notify me of the court appearance. And some of those have even failed to succeed. So, so they can appeal, but unlikely they'll be successful. So some states, and I know I wasn't, some states in recognition of this have passed laws for the state. So again, this is federal legislation, but they have passed laws within the state to relieve that timeline, specifically for families where the separation or the child's involvement in foster care is due to, at least in part, the separation due to the parent's incarceration. So we have tried that in the state. We actually tried it in partnership with the Connecticut Sentencing Commission. We worked for, I think, 2 years on language. And then suddenly DCF pulled back. They were supportive, and then they suddenly pulled back from supporting it and said that they would fight it if we pursued it. So we are still actually interested in pursuing this. Connecticut does not have any protections for the incarcerated parents and the children. I can talk more about it, but we had included in it having, if DCF wants the parents participate in certain programming while the parent is incarcerated, that programming should be in line with what that facility has currently available. You don't want to say, well, you have to, you can't get your children back until you've completed substance abuse treatment, but that prison that they're housed in doesn't offer substance abuse treatment, or there's a 3-year wait list and you're only being incarcerated for 4 months, but then you get out, you can't complete it, and then the timeline has run out with DCF. So part of what we were proposing involved just having those requirements be in consideration of what is actually accessible to the parent. So that certainly if it's accessible and the parent doesn't do it, then certainly, that's something to consider, and the state should factor that in and make a decision. But if it's not available, we don't want the parent to be left, or the children to be left harmed because of that. Okay, so that was kind of the background on prevalence and potential impact on children and families. Very brief. I do have many more slides and things that I was doing in full training, but so now that's what the state was kind of looking at, are the things that the state took into consideration when they committed funding to support children that were going through this. And so in fiscal year 08, they did dedicate annual funding to us to support children with incarcerated parents. In doing so, they created the first statewide initiative for children with incarcerated parents in the state and in the country. Our goal is to use the information that we gather to inform intervention and public policy development. We have become Connecticut's resource center on children with incarcerated parents. So we receive phone calls and emails and things from counselors, from schools, from parents, but also state agencies, from legislators when they have a question or a concern. So churches, if there's a provider that wants to do something for kids, but they don't know what, we work with whomever reaches out as best we can to try and see how we can enhance and develop more supports for children with incarcerated parents in Connecticut. Some of the things we do, program support and development, like I said, research and program evaluation. We do training, consultation, technical assistance. We develop resources as we realize needs that are present. We work with policymakers on statewide policy, but also state agency level policy and practice change. We've developed several different forms of media to try and communicate to people what is going on with children and families. And we have a scholarship program. A little more. I'm not going to talk about all of these. Don't worry. And there's more on our website, which is like why I included the link there. But since fiscal year 2008, we have supported a series of diverse types of interventions to try to support children. This is only a representative sample. The top one is a literacy-based mentoring program that works with both the incarcerated parent and the children. Breaking the Cycle was a community support group that we created that's kind of somewhat like an AA where it's non-clinical, it's really the community coming together to support each other. That was developed after community dialogues where we heard from the community saying we really need to support each other more. So we invested in developing those, and those are still occurring. We've funded and supported kind of typical clinical interventions at a provider in New Haven. We have supported arts-based interventions, working with the children in the community and their incarcerated parent. And the last one in the sample here is an arrest protocol for when police make an arrest and there are children present, how the police and other providers can respond to the children, try and help them process what has occurred and understand what's going on. We also, so those are really, larger scale. We put out an RFP, providers, apply for it, and we fund them. We also, again, as Andrew mentioned earlier, we have been at Central Connecticut State University for many years. We were, of course, now very excited to be at UConn. While we were at CCSU, one of the things we did was we would put out community engagement grants to work with faculty and community in an intentional partnership to try and support children with incarcerated parents. So again, there are more examples on our website, but I wanted to provide some to again showcase some of the diversity in what we have supported. One was Youth Voice, and was really having teen children with incarcerated parents develop media, talking about what they want people to know about what it is being a child with an incarcerated parent. We worked for many years with a business program or a business course, project management for business. this professor every semester would have her class break up into small groups, and we would identify a community provider that supported children with incarcerated parents. And throughout the semester, these groups would compete with each other to develop a website for that community provider. We'd start out in the semester with coming and talking about children with incarcerated parents, and the provider would talk about the services that they provide. The students would all work for the semester creating their sites, and at the end of the semester, they'd present to our initiative and the provider what the group had come up with. And it was a really fun project. And then at the end of the semester, one team would kind of win, if you will. And then if the provider and a student was interested, they would then work together. We would usually hire the student to work with the provider to really finish the site and launch it. And then it would be, and still some of these providers use the websites that were created by the students. Production in the community was another media one. We paired CCSU advanced production filmmaking students with youth that were in the Peace Builders program in Hartford. That was really for at-risk youth, but the youth developed little mini films that they then edited with their mentor, which was the CCSU student. So these one-on-one kind of mentoring, but they created little video shorts, which was fun. And again, these are just representative samples. I thought I'd bring up the Naylor School one too. It was in Hartford, but what's unique about that, I think, is that it involved several departments at the university: teacher education, English, and art education all came together with this Hartford school to work with students over a lengthier period of time. 7th, 8th grade students wrote different types of written media, letters, poems, short stories. And then the CCSU students that were in an advanced creative nonfiction class reviewed and edited their writing works, and then they had it published as a part of a literary journal called The Helix, which was then distributed to all public libraries throughout the state. So these children in this 7th and 8th grade classes had their poems and art and things published, which is really neat. And then our education students worked on a huge mural. I don't know if anyone's ever been to Naylor School, but we walked in a very grand entranceway, multi-level with lots of light coming in. And so the children with incarcerated parents from Naylor School worked with the CCSU students and with the professor, and they created this incredible, huge mural that, as far as I understand, is still up in the entranceway. So again, I showcase those just to show, I know we love it when people think outside the box and really get creative and let us know what they're interested in and what they think would be helpful and they'd like to try and do in a meaningful partnership with the community. So as I mentioned, we have, of course, supported lots of direct support for children in the community. In addition to that, we've learned a lot. As we were going through this process, we've learned a lot. And so we've tried to be responsive to families' needs in other ways as well. So some of those ways, we learned that a lot of the providers don't know specifically how to support these children the best. They may be experts in trauma, experts in parental separation, but when it gets to having a parent incarcerated, there was a big knowledge gap. So some of the things we've done is worked with providers on developing their program model. We conduct training, as I said, consultation, technical assistance. We also learned that there was a gap in the research that was available, and that there was a real need for some local policy research that would inform policy, and then some research that would address stigma. So one thing with the Public Defender's Office years ago was pushing for family impact statements to be adopted in our legal process, which would allow the sentencing judge or sentencing body, if it was a jury, review a family impact statement. How, if you sentence this parent to incarceration, how it may impact children. And so the Public Defender's Office was having a hard time with that. We decided we wanted to help provide some data to inform the decision by the legislature. And so we conducted a survey at the New Britain Courthouse that talked about or asked people about the types and number of supports that defendant was providing kids in the month prior to arrest, to try to get numbers on just what are kids going to lose if this parent ends up going to prison. You know, is it going to be the one that helps them with homework, the one who gives them transportation, other government benefits going to not, feed down to the children? And so we have that study. We also then to address stigma, a study that was, or excuse me, statistics that were being used across the world on children with incarcerated parents, where that children with incarcerated parents, 7 out of 10 of them will end up incarcerated themselves, and that they're 6 times more likely than none, the children who don't have a parent incarcerated, to end up involved with the criminal justice system. And we've kept hearing for years that there was a belief that these numbers were highly inaccurate, but it was causing such stigma amongst the children who would hear it. And it was really helping them feel hopeless and helpless. But no one knew where the numbers came from. So a faculty member decided to research this for a while, and their findings were that it wasn't even close. So after the title of the report was 7 out of 10, not even close, because it was not even close to that number. And so that's been actually now discussed worldwide. And colleague Large was at a conference in Portugal last year, and it was being talked a lot by the government leaders there who were speaking, which is really exciting to hear. But we try and be responsive and see what we can do. We realize the need for policy change at the state level. So one was child support debt accrual. When a parent becomes incarcerated, if they are an obligor for child support, that debt can continue to accrue while they're incarcerated. And then when they leave prison, they could end up having significant debt that they cannot possibly ever pay. And that can be a violation of probation automatically. And it's kind of setting them up for failure. And then that can also lead to them not engaging with their child because they feel shame that they have not provided the support. So but the General Assembly, with assistance from us, we're able to support legislation that now allows the state to file automatically. If there's a parent incarcerated, the state can file to have their accrual stop a month after the parent's incarcerated and won't resume until I believe it's 6 months after the parent comes home. So that is intended to support them. And then free telecommunications was a huge one a few years ago. Connecticut now is the first state in the country to allow free phone calls from prison. And we were very excited about that because of all of the research that shows about how maintaining contact and communication is so helpful, but the cost of phone calls was astronomical. So that's a really exciting success. In addition to that, when we were performing our program evaluations, it was really difficult finding assessment measures that could apply well to our families. We wanted to measure attachment. We keep hearing about how attachment disruption, so much research shows how attachment disruption is a significant challenge for children with incarcerated parents. And so we wanted to be able to measure, does this intervention in any way help with that attachment disruption? But there was no measure that we could really apply. A lot of them were, when you get home from school and get a bad day, do you go and talk to your parent about it? You can't ask them that because they can't. It's not their choice. It's not based on attachment if they don't do or don't. So we have developed our own attachment scale specifically for children with incarcerated parents that we have just piloted for the first time. And so we're trying to look at its reliability and accuracy. We also created a stigma measure specifically for children with incarcerated parents. We learned that reentry was the most disruptive time for most families. So we have developed a family reentry workbook that we're about to pilot as part of a federal grant with several prisons across the state. And we've also, over the years, learned access to reliable information for families. And families often, due to lack of trust and also just very, very busy lives, and trying to now have a single, be a single parent and everything and support a loved one incarcerated. They don't have a lot of time to try and seek information. And as I said, some are hiding in the shadows. And so we wanted to provide information that was accurate, but hopefully in a form that families will be able to access. We developed a frequently asked questions booklet with people with personal experience, in addition to Department of Corrections and with a community provider that provided counseling to children, so that hopefully, so the questions were accurate, the answers were accurate, although child friendly for the children's section. And we also created it. Oh, and also with this, we're now creating a Spanish version. We also created a children's website so that children have a place that they could go. So on the website, it's very interactive. So you can click on all of these different buildings, and you can also click on Chip the dog. And if children have a question, they can email, they can click on Chip, send it out, we'll get the email, and we can provide a response that is child friendly and accurate. And children can click on the prison. I would highly recommend you go, even if it's just for fun. But for the prison, you can click on, like you can click, this may be where your parent sleeps. And we took a photo of an actual prison cell from Connecticut prison, but had it drawn like a cartoon. So it's accurate, but it's completely child friendly. Same with the visiting room. We show a visiting room. We show a contact one, a non-contact one. We show the waiting area. all cartoon-like, and we show a courthouse, and children can click on the different people in the courthouse, click on the different people in the prison, in the waiting room, to learn about everyone's role, and who people might be. Additional supports, research shows that, or suggests, I should say, maintaining relationships during separation reduces recidivism and improves child health and well-being. You know, a lot of families, or some families, don't visit for a myriad of reasons, but many cite feeling that the environment is not child-friendly. So either the incarcerated parent may not want their kids to come because they don't want their kids to be exposed to what they feel they're being exposed to. The caregiver may not want to bring their kids, thinking it's not child-friendly. Kids might feel uncomfortable. And so we worked with Robert Cybulski, to transform their visiting area into being child-friendly. And one thing is these long tables you have to sit across from, you can't touch. It was a series of smaller square tables. Each family has their own table, which is nice, a little more intimate. They also changed their rules to allow the families to touch throughout the visit, which they weren't allowed to do before. They have an outdoor play area for nice weather, and then of course the indoor play area is much nicer, chalkboard on the wall and everything. We did also provide training for the corrections officers on children with incarcerated parents and how they can better support kids during visits and other interactions. We also now have purchased and built a playground at York, which is the only women's prison in Connecticut, only women's state prison in Connecticut. We're hoping to have that grand opening around Mother's Day, but that's already up, so we're super excited about that. Now we're working with McDougall Walker, which is the largest male prison in Connecticut. They have nothing for kids. You go there, it's just very depressing and cold and hard, but they want a whole children's section, which is nice. And then even absent a children's section, where, and this is what Madison's working on with us a lot, they want the whole rest of the room too, to paint and murals, and they want to add some of these round chairs. And so, and also the entryway, we want to make that more welcoming, so when kids first enter, it doesn't feel so harsh and jolting. We want to, and yeah. So that's exciting. We're working with them on that. It's a lot of work, but it's exciting. Lack of awareness of parental incarceration's impact and policies. So we've created a documentary called Halfway Home, A Father's Story, which does follow, running out of time, okay. Follows a father returning from a Connecticut prison, trying to return to his kids through a halfway house program. So that's a really interesting film, I think 22 minutes long. There's a 3-minute voices of children talking about their incarcerated parent and what they wish people knew about their parent and about them. And it's super sweet, just little baby voices. And then other media that's on our website. Some of our current projects. We mentioned the playground, the McDougall Walker visiting area. We're engaged in a nationwide study examining statewide practices to support children with incarcerated parents. That's along with Council of State Governments and the National Resource Center for Children and Families being incarcerated. We also are engaging in an OGJDP funded Strengthening Families project along with DCF and DOC and several community providers to support families when an incarcerated parent is leaving, an incarcerated father specifically is leaving a Connecticut prison. That's now with several prisons in Connecticut. It is now a statewide project. And also in the International Justice Exchange project, which is comparing Connecticut and US criminal justice and corrections practices with other nations. Really excited about that. That's a new one. We are going to start training Department of Corrections staff on family engagement, where we will also be training DOC and DCF together on how to support families that are mutually involved. And also we will be hosting later this year, training for all criminal justice agencies on supporting criminal justice involved fathers. I mentioned the booklet, and we're making a Spanish version. We are also going to be building out a resource database for educators, social workers, attorneys, and other specific practitioners on how they can support children with incarcerated parents in their practice. And then we do have our scholarship program, which was at Central, and now we're going to be launching it at UConn this year. We're super excited. At Central, we did already give out $80,000 in total over the years in scholarships. We're excited to start doing that here. Each scholarship is up to $1,500 per semester, up to 6 semesters. And you can donate to our scholarship fund during New-Time Gives if anyone wants. It's only March 8th and 9th. And people can also scan the QR code if you're interested. donating, or becoming a champion, which would be assisting with social media and getting the word out during those 2 days. And see if you want to try and help promote it and see if people will donate to support and build our scholarship fund here. Current research interests. Last year we did release an announcement of research opportunities. We did not end up, unfortunately, connecting with anyone on these, but we still are interested. So I thought I would include it here. It's a series of things we're interested in: a statewide needs assessment for children with incarcerated parents, in the current state, what they need post COVID, if you will. We're still interested in actually gathering hard data on ASPA's impact on Connecticut children and families. We would love an assessment on the installation of the playground and how that may have impacted children, families, but also corrections officers who supervise visits, see if there's any change in their perceptions or any other outcomes. How the sudden prohibition on in-person visits due to COVID impacted children and incarcerated parents. The mental health and well-being of the newly established unit within York that's for expectant mothers. They have a doula program. It's a whole separate unit just for expectant mothers. And then after a mother gives birth, they are allowed to come back to that unit for postpartum for a little while. And then also we're really interested in legal research, exploring legal issues surrounding the rights of children with incarcerated parents and their incarcerated parent in their role as a parent, and potentially putting out resources in the future, legal resources that could support children and families. Any questions or anything? I know I didn't take much time. I'm so sorry.
Okay, so how do you, okay, so how do we? All right, so how do you promote awareness for incarcerated parents? Like, what can you do to persuade local and state officials to make it so incarcerated parents are still able to bond with their child?
I think that's an excellent question. I think a lot of people don't know, including policymakers, aren't aware of just how common, how prevalent it is in the state and in the country to have an incarcerated parent, and also the level of impact. And
even if they do know, do you think, I highly doubt they would have cared either way.
what's sad is some people who don't care, usually, I will say, usually those who don't care about the adults as much as we would like them to, do care about the kids. A lot of people do. That is kind of a common concern, is concern for children, recognizing that they are innocent in every way with regard to this. And so usually focusing on the kids does help, although not always. When that doesn't work, sometimes the financial impact of incarcerated parents will work. And there has been a study done looking at the cost to government for incarcerating parents, because of then the drain it has on our welfare system, and then the lack of tax paying revenue, because families are struggling so much in the absence of their incarcerated parent, and also trying to compensate for the cost of incarceration, putting money in commissary. Previously, the phone calls, but fortunately those are now free. So there has been some research on that. So yeah, usually they can focus on kids, and if not, then the money, sadly, they don't care about just justice and humanity.
One question in the chat, is there any data about how the new services like the playground have improved the meetings parents have with their kids?
Thank you. That is one of the things we're interested in. I would love to find faculty or someone who would be interested in measuring that and performing a study. We don't have a study right now on the impact of the playground. And then, McDougal Walker will be a great opportunity also, because that's not up yet. And actually the playground hasn't been used yet. So yeah, we're still in a prime time to get research going on those things. We do know just from talking to incarcerated moms that some of them have said, well, I told my kids I don't want them to come, they can't visit, but now that there's a playground here, I think they'll want to come, and I think it's okay. So just from those conversations, we know that it seems like that's going to change things, but we would love to actually have a real study that we could point to that could show the benefits, because that also could lead to greater investment by the state, because we still have several other facilities that have nothing for kids.
Next question.
Yeah.
I apologize for being late. Do we have any data on the number of babies being born while their mothers are incarcerated?
We don't. Years ago, when there was a push for a prison nursery, there had been data collected on it. I have talked to Warden Sexton over there. She says there are a lot of babies, there are a lot of pregnant women coming in now. She does have this separate unit. We certainly could get that data quickly, but I don't have it.
One of the things you said you provide is under your program development umbrella. So I was just wondering if I can have like a concrete example around what programming do you provide, like skills, tools, what does that look like?
It's most specifically,
And to whom?
yeah, it's well, it depends. It's either we have designed programs ourselves, interventions ourselves based on, one was, we wanted to do a collaborative response or collaborative supportive response for incarcerated fathers who will be coming home through a halfway house program. And it was with a community provider, Families in Crisis at the time, one of the halfway house providers, community, CSI. Thank you, Community Solutions, Inc. And so we held a series of focus groups with incarcerated fathers about what they thought would be helpful as they go through the halfway house program, what they would like would be helpful. And then we designed, it took a while, we designed the model so with that information on what we would provide for the families through that program. Another was, so some of it is more formal like that, it's more of this lengthy process. Another is meeting with them and they want to do something, and so it's us engaging with them, talking to them what we know about children with incarcerated parents. This is how you may want to seek to support them. These are some of the things that we hear from families and stuff like that. So some of it's more formal, some of it's not. The arrest protocol was, we had contracted with the provider to develop the model, but we were actively engaged with it. One thing that we saw, so for a series of months, they had an advisory group come together with all invested parties to help inform the model. The one thing we noticed was that people with personal experience were not very vocal. We were providing compensation for them to attend because everyone else there was there as part of their work, so they were all being compensated from their employer. We were providing compensation for the people with personal experience to attend and contribute, but we noticed they weren't really talking much. So, and we really believe we need to hear from those that know best, for those who are experiencing it, to help inform whatever we do. And so we had a separate focus group for them where they could just on their own talk about it in a more comfortable environment. We were thinking there was some hesitation, due to the people that were in the room, because we had a lot of corrections people there, a lot of police officers and stuff. And so that, so it depends on what it is we're doing. For RFPs, what we want to have people with personal experience informing us on what is we should do next. It depends on what we're looking. Or if it's a church or something that reaches out and wants to do something, I just meet with them and not engage in more of a lengthy research process to find out.
We have one more question from Brendan in the chat. Is there any data or general sentiments to show how Connecticut compares to other states regarding overall investment and management of children who have incarcerated parents?
So that's actually, partly I guess the statewide study or the national study looking at statewide initiatives. Connecticut was the first. There is really only one other now in Maryland that has invested specifically in a statewide way for children with incarcerated parents. Their model is different. They have more county government in terms of local government. And so that governor dedicated funding and then gave it to each county, and then each county determined itself what it wanted to do for its county. There haven't been comparison studies to look at kind of what Connecticut's done versus Maryland or any other place, but it's not exactly, there is no real data on top of that.
As we are concluding, if there is any more questions, I think data has come up a lot. Would you kind of tell us more about some of the ethical dilemma when it comes to data collection with children with incarcerated parents and their families?
Yeah, so there are a lot, thank you. There are a lot, data is a big issue within this because how data is collected is one concern. Who's being asked? It is an experience that can be very stigmatizing and also can lead to disparate treatment. So when a school finds out that a child's parent is incarcerated, there are no short of stories of the school treating that child differently and adding to the collateral harm. And it's not just schools, I'm using them as an example, but and one, a minor example is, a child who is known to have a parent incarcerated breaks a minor infraction in school dress code or something like that. And the response is more harsh because the school may look at it as this is an early sign of deviance, and we're going to nip it in the bud so they don't go down that parent's track. Where they're actually, instead of actually, helping that child, they might be speed tracking them down the school to prison pipeline because they are treating them more harshly than their peers, when really they're doing something that is a normal adolescent behavior. So again, there's some concern with how data is collected because it also is a traumatizing experience. So if you're gonna have them just fill out a survey, with ACEs, there was a bill a couple years ago, even last year, to have all schools in Connecticut collect data on exposure to adverse childhood experiences. And they were just gonna have students sit in their classroom and complete a survey. Have you ever been sexually assaulted or molested? Does your parent have mental illness or drug or alcohol use? Do you have a parent incarcerated? And we had great concern with, are there gonna be supports for these kids? So it's how you ask the questions in a supportive way. Also, there is a lot of secrecy again in a manner of protecting the family. There's also hesitation to the protection, that there's fear the data will get out to child support or will get out to child welfare. And then is the child going to be taken from their current situation because child welfare is now aware that there's a parent incarcerated. And then once you have that data, who has access to it? The bill that was, I think it was last year about collecting data on ACEs, the local school board was going to have that data. So then that's often parents. So now little Joey has revealed that his mom's in prison or that his mom has mental illness. And now its classmate's mom has that data because she's on the board. How can you protect this child to make sure they're not going to endure significant additional harm? So who has access to, and then how is that data used? There's another model of a program, it's the warm handoff. I can't think of the name if you don't remember it, but it's and it's designed with the best of intentions, and many of these are designed with good intentions, but they can have unintended collateral harm if you're not using people with personal experience to help inform or experts to help inform. A parent, there's an arrest at the house and the police have a process to automatically tell the school if there was a child there. So now the school knows. This is designed to help so that the school can support that child and know if the child is tired, cranky, this is what's happened, and the school should provide extra supports for that child, maybe a little leniency if there was a big test that day. But instead, it can cause, again, kind of this collateral harm where the school ends up treating them differently. And a lot of times parents don't want schools to know because they say, I've had moms tell me, that's the one place my child doesn't have to think about this if they don't want to. They can talk about as much as they want here with their family, with anyone in the community, but when they go to school, I want them to just put this aside and just be a normal, quote unquote, 15-year-old or whatever it is. So yeah, there's a lot of push-pull. A lot of policymakers want data, and then a lot of families and advocates don't want data, or they want it done only in the right way. And there's a lot of places along that continuum of data where the children and families could end up being more harmed. So,
Thank you, Eileen, and thank you for all those who have attended. I'm going to close out.
thanks, everyone.
Before you close it up, you just want to announce when the next one is.
Yes, our next lunch and learn seminar will be on April 5th. Same times, noon to 1, and that will be on pre-trial reforms from the Connecticut Sentencing Commission. So thank you, and we hope to see you there.